She walked through our front door glowing like someone who'd spent 2 weeks at a luxury spa. Tanned skin, loose shoulders, a lightness in her smile that I hadn't seen in months. And right then, before she even set down her luggage, I already knew everything. Not because she'd confessed, because I work with outbreak data for a living, and her lover's name had crossed my desk 3 years ago in a federal briefing that most people will never be cleared to read. My name is Marcus Ellison. I'm 48 years old, and for the past 16 years I've worked as a health policy advisor for the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. My job is pattern recognition, connecting dots between epidemiological data, budget requests, and public health briefings that tend to obscure more than they reveal. I've helped design federal protocols for pandemic containment, international exposure tracking, and biosecurity response. In short, I read between the lines for a living. Iparese when my wife Diana left for a 15-day leadership retreat in Peru and went completely dark. No photos, no check-ins, barely a text. Every professional instinct I had screamed that something was wrong. Diana and I had been married 18 years. She was 42, sharp-minded, relentlessly competent, and worked as a senior consultant for a multinational advisory firm. She traveled 4 or 5 times a year, sometimes more, and she always, without exception, sent photos. She documented her entire life like she was producing a travel documentary: airport lounges, hotel room views, restaurant menus, even the minibar if it had something unusual. That was just Diana. This trip, I got one text: safe arrival, going dark for the retreat. Focus time. And then nothing. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee cooling beside me and opened our shared cloud storage. Empty, not a single image from Peru. Her location services had been disabled 2 days after she landed. Her social media, usually full of little updates, had gone silent the moment her plane touched down in Lima. But the credit card statements told a completely different story. I pulled up our accounts, something I almost never bothered with since we'd always handled finances with mutual trust. The charges were all there. Time-stamped. A luxury hotel in Lima, another in Cusco, then a high-end jungle resort in Urubamba. Spa packages, wine tastings, private sunset dinners, and 2 words that hit me like something physical: couples massage. I sat back and let that settle. The hotel booking confirmations were still synced to our home computer. I clicked through them slowly, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. Every reservation showed 2 guests, Mr. and Mrs. Ellison. Except I had been sitting in Virginia for 15 days while someone else was apparently enjoying candlelit dinners and sunrise yoga sessions in the Sacred Valley as me. I pulled up the company roster Diana had shared months earlier when she moved into her new division. I scrolled until I found the name: Nathan Forsyth, Junior Associate, 34 years old. Diana had mentioned him exactly once, dismissively. Talented but inexperienced, she'd said. Inexperienced enough to spend 15 days in paradise with my wife, apparently. I didn't break anything. Didn't pick up the phone and call her screaming. I've spent too many years managing crises to react before I have complete information. What I did instead was make a fresh pot of coffee, open my secure work laptop, and start pulling threads. Because here's what most people don't understand about working in public health policy for nearly 2 decades. You build a network, contacts at the CDC, former colleagues who moved into private biosecurity consulting, friends at the NIH who trust your discretion, people who know that sometimes critical information needs to travel through back channels before it travels anywhere official. And Nathan Forsyth's name had appeared in one of those back channels before. 3 years earlier, his name surfaced in a confidential CDC briefing I reviewed as part of a cross-agency task force on international disease transmission protocols. I went back into my secure archive and pulled the file. The case involved a biotech startup in Ecuador where Forsyth had worked as a logistics coordinator during a gap year before graduate school. The company was running unauthorized trials on experimental antiparasitic compounds, cutting corners on safety oversight, conducting tests on local communities without proper consent or monitoring. When the outbreak occurred, 47 people got sick, 6 died. Ecuadorian authorities shut down the facility, and the CDC got involved because 2 American researchers had been exposed and returned to the United States before showing symptoms. Forsyth had been listed as a person of interest in the exposure chain, not because he deliberately caused harm, but because he had falsified quarantine logs to cover his own travel back to the US after potential exposure. He'd lied about his whereabouts, lied about symptoms, boarded international flights while potentially contagious because he had graduate school interviews he didn't want to miss. The investigation concluded he'd gotten lucky and hadn't actually been infected. But the behavioral pattern was clear as glass. Nathan Forsyth prioritized himself above every other consideration, including the safety of people around him. The case was settled quietly. The company paid out millions. Forsyth signed a non-disclosure agreement, agreed to stay out of pharmaceutical research permanently, and disappeared into the corporate consulting world, where background checks rarely dig deep enough to find sealed federal reports. And now he was in Peru with my wife. I printed the relevant sections of the file, redacting the classified portions but keeping the core facts intact. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first was to an old colleague at the CDC's Division of Global Migration and Quarantine. We'd worked together on pandemic response frameworks for years, and I'd helped push through funding for her department the previous fiscal year. "Owen," she said when she picked up, "I haven't heard from you in months. What do you need?" I kept it simple. Current health alerts for Peru, specifically the Cusco region and Sacred Valley. Anything flagged in the last 60 days involving parasitic infections or waterborne pathogens. She paused. "That's very specific." "Personal interest," I said. "A friend traveled through that area. You know how it goes." She did. 20 minutes later, my inbox had a summary report. 2 active alerts. One for a drug-resistant strain of Giardia showing up in tourists who'd stayed at jungle lodges near Urubamba. Another for a rare fungal infection traced back to contaminated water systems in boutique hotels that recycled gray water without adequate treatment. Both alerts recommended immediate medical screening for anyone who'd visited the affected areas within the past month. My second call went to the attorney who'd handled our prenuptial agreement. We spent 15 minutes reviewing the infidelity clause. Diana had actually insisted on that clause herself when we drafted the contract. She'd called it a mutual accountability measure. If either party engaged in a documented extramarital affair, the non-offending spouse retained full control of joint assets and property. Funny how the things we demand of others eventually circle back around. My third call was to our insurance broker. I asked a hypothetical question about travel health coverage. Whether our policy would cover emergency medical treatment for tropical diseases contracted during personal travel that had been misrepresented as a business trip. If the travel details were falsified on the claim forms, he said carefully, coverage could be voided. Fraud nullifies the contract. I thanked him, hung up, and looked at the calendar. Diana was due home in 3 days. I had 72 hours, and I wasn't going to waste a single minute of them. Because here's what I learned a long time ago working in crisis management. You don't react to disasters after they've already happened. You build containment strategies before they fully unfold. You document everything, and when the moment arrives, you execute with precision. Diana walked in on a Thursday evening looking exactly like someone who'd spent 2 weeks being adored. She dropped her bags in the hallway, stretched her arms overhead, and smiled at me the way you smile at a roommate you haven't seen in a while. "God, it's good to be home." She kissed my cheek, that casual, habitual peck, and moved toward the refrigerator. "I'm starving. Did you eat already?" "I made dinner," I said. "It's in the oven, staying warm." Her face lit up. "You're the best. Let me shower first." She disappeared upstairs. I heard the water running, heard her humming something cheerful. Actually humming, like someone without a single worry in the world. 15 minutes later, she came back down in comfortable clothes, hair still damp, looking entirely at ease with herself. We sat across from each other, I'd made her favorite, lemon herb chicken with roasted vegetables. She ate with real enthusiasm, offering vague stories about team exercises and planning sessions. No specific names, no particular locations, just pleasant corporate abstractions that could mean anything and revealed nothing. How was the hotel? I asked. Beautiful, right up in the mountains. The altitude was rough the first 2 days, but we adjusted. She paused over the word we, her eyes moved slightly, recalibrating. The team, I mean. The four of us, Sarah and the others. I let the silence stretch for exactly 3 seconds. Then I slid a printed photograph across the table. I'd pulled it from the resort's Instagram account, a promotional post featuring their signature couples package at the Urubamba property. The same suite that appeared on her booking confirmation. Diana looked at the photo. Her fork stopped moving halfway to her mouth. "What is this? Your hotel?" I said. "The 5-star couples retreat. Romantic packages, private dining." She set the fork down with deliberate care. "Marcus, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I said. "But before you do, I need to ask you something first." Her throat moved as she swallowed. "Okay." I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice level and quiet, because I didn't need volume. I had something better than volume. "Do you know what Nathan is sick with?" The color left her face like someone had opened a drain. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again without producing a sound. "Nathan Forsyth?" I said. "Your junior associate. Your travel companion. Do you know what he's been diagnosed with?" "I don't." "He's not." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping hard against the floor. "What are you talking about?" "He's not sick. I barely." "Diana." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. "Do you know what he's sick with?" She stared at me. I watched the calculations running behind her eyes, the denial forming and dissolving, the creeping understanding that I knew something she hadn't anticipated me knowing. "I need to make a call," she whispered finally. "No," I said. "What you need to do is see a doctor first thing tomorrow morning." Her hands were shaking. "Why? What did you do?" "I didn't do anything." "But you might have." She grabbed her phone from the counter and started dialing, fingers fumbling. I watched her try Nathan's number 3 times. 3 times it went straight to voicemail. "He's not answering," she said, her voice rising towards something close to panic. "Why isn't he answering?" I stood up and cleared my plate. Unhurried. Deliberate. "You should probably get some rest. You have a long day tomorrow. Marcus, please." "What is going on?" I looked at her directly, really looked at her, and felt something I hadn't expected, not anger anymore. Something closer to the quiet after a storm. "You made your choices, Diana. Now you get to live with what comes next." She didn't sleep that night. I could hear her pacing in the guest room, making call after call. Nathan's number, colleagues, someone from HR at her firm. Each conversation more frantic than the last. By morning, her eyes were sunken and red. She came downstairs still in yesterday's clothes, phone clutched like it was the only solid thing left. "I'm going to the clinic," she announced. "Good idea," I said, pouring my coffee without looking up. "Come with me, please." "I'm scared." "You should be," I said quietly. She left without another word. I waited until her car turned out of sight, then called my attorney. "She's getting tested now," I told him. "We'll have results by tomorrow. Have the asset protection documents ready to execute the moment we have documentation." "Are you certain about this?" he asked. I thought about the booking confirmations, the deleted photos, the 15 days of performance art she'd called a leadership retreat. Completely certain. Diana returned 4 hours later looking gray. She went straight to the bathroom. I heard her getting sick. When she came out, she looked like someone who'd aged a decade in an afternoon. "They're running a full panel," she said. "Tropical diseases, parasitic infections, everything. 48 hours for results." I nodded. "Nathan's number is disconnected," she continued. "His work email bounced. I called his office and they said he's on indefinite medical leave. They wouldn't tell me anything else." "Medical leave," I repeated. "Interesting." "What did you do?" she whispered. "How did you know any of this?" I finally looked at her directly. 3 years ago, Nathan Forsyth was connected to a disease outbreak in Ecuador that killed 6 people. He falsified quarantine documents and lied to federal investigators. That's documented in a confidential CDC briefing I reviewed as part of a cross-agency task force. I saw his name. I remembered it. "It's what I do, Diana." Her legs seemed to give out from under her. She lowered herself onto the couch slowly, hands covering her face. "You went to Peru with a man who has a documented history of reckless exposure to infectious disease," I continued. "You stayed in hotels with flagged contamination issues. You came home thinking I wouldn't notice." "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear I didn't know about any of that. But you knew you were lying to me." That was enough. She looked up, mascara streaked across her cheeks. "Are you divorcing me?" "That depends," I said, "on what the test results show, on what the lawyers advise, on a number of things. I made a mistake. I was feeling invisible and he made me feel seen, and Diana," I cut her off. "I don't care about the reasons. I care about the consequences." My phone buzzed on the table. A text from my CDC contact. Results came back early. "Call when you can. It's not good." I held the screen toward her, mi pareja. She could read the preview. Her face went white. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," I said, standing up and walking toward my home office, "that you should probably find yourself a lawyer, because this just became considerably more complicated than you expected." I closed the door behind me, leaving her alone with the silence and whatever was building inside her chest. Tomorrow the full results would arrive. Tomorrow she'd understand precisely how badly she'd miscalculated. But right now, I had calls to make and documents to file. The thing about consequences is simple. They don't care whether you're sorry. The test results came through on secure email at 7 in the morning. I read them twice before Diana woke up. Giardia lamblia, drug-resistant strain, active infection. Exposure window matched her Peru travel dates exactly. Minimum 12 weeks of treatment required, with ongoing monitoring for chronic complications. The report also flagged elevated liver enzymes consistent with exposure from contaminated water systems. My own results, I'd been tested as a precaution, came back clean. We hadn't been physically close since before her trip, something I'd engineered carefully by citing work exhaustion and spending most nights in my office. I forwarded both reports to my attorney with a single line: "Documentation confirmed. Proceed with asset protection protocol." When Diana finally came downstairs, she took one look at my face and stopped in the doorway. "You got them," she said. I turned my laptop around, mi pareja. She could read the screen, watched her eyes move across the medical terminology, watched her face collapse as the full meaning settled in. "I'm sick," she whispered. "You're infected," I corrected. "There's treatment. It's manageable." "But yes, you brought back exactly what the data suggested you would." She sank into a chair and stared at nothing. "How serious is it?" "Depends entirely on your luck. Best case, 12 weeks of medication and you're clear. Worst case, chronic digestive complications for years, possible liver involvement. The drug-resistant strain complicates the treatment options significantly." She looked up. "And you're clean?" "Yes. We'll need to keep it that way, which means separate living arrangements starting today." Her head came up fast. "What?" I pulled out the folder my attorney had prepared. The prenuptial agreement, highlighted. Dissolution paperwork, drawn up and ready for signature. "You violated the infidelity clause," I said. "You contracted a disease through an extramarital relationship. You used joint marital funds to finance the trip. That's 3 separate contractual breaches." "Marcus, please. I've already moved half of our joint accounts into protected assets," I continued. "The house remains mine, purchased before our marriage. Your retirement accounts stay yours. Everything else gets divided according to the exact terms you insisted on when we originally signed this." "I'll fight it," she said weakly. "With what resources?" I asked. "Because Diana, your company's HR department already contacted me yesterday as your emergency contact." Nathan's medical leave triggered an internal review. They found the hotel bookings. They found the expense reports you filed. They know the Peru trip had nothing to do with any leadership retreat. She went from pale to something closer to gray. They can't fire me for that. For fraudulently misrepresenting personal travel as business expenses? Yes, they absolutely can, and they will. I picked up my briefcase. I have meetings in DC today. When I get back this evening, I expect your things moved to the guest suite. We'll maintain separate arrangements until the divorce is finalized. You can't just remove me from my own home. I'm not removing you. I'm protecting myself from further contamination, medical and legal both. My attorney will be in touch about the timeline. I'd recommend you start looking for your own representation. I walked toward the door. She called after me, voice cracking. What about Nathan? Did he know? Did he do this on purpose? I stopped, hand on the doorknob. Nathan Forsyth disappeared 3 days ago, I said. His apartment is cleared out. His car is gone. His phone is disconnected. Either he's dead or he ran. I had someone check, professional courtesy. Where is he? I opened the door. Here's what you need to understand, Diana. Nathan used you. Maybe he knew about the infection risk and simply didn't care. Maybe he was just reckless out of habit. Either way, he's gone. He's not coming back. He's not going to help you. You're facing this alone. I left her sitting there and drove to work like it was any other Thursday. For me, it essentially was. I documented the exposure, protected my assets, and initiated the dissolution process. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Diana could cry all she wanted. Crying doesn't alter test results. That evening my niece Sophie called, her voice tight with worry. She was 23, my sister's daughter, studying public health at Georgetown. We'd always been close. Uncle Marcus, she said, I heard about Aunt Diana. Mom told me. I'm mi pareja, sorry. It's complicated, I said, pulling into a parking garage near the restaurant where I was meeting my attorney for dinner. Is it true she got sick in Peru? It's true. A pause on the line. The thing is, I need to tell you something about Nathan Forsyth. I killed the engine and sat very still. You know him. We were at Princeton at the same time. Different years, but we crossed paths at a few events. He had a reputation. What kind of reputation? Sophie hesitated. He specifically targeted married women, older professional women with money and status. It was like a sport to him. He'd pursue them, get them to fund trips or buy him things, then disappear the moment he got bored or needed to move on to someone new. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Did the pattern ever involve illness, diseases? I don't know specifically about that, but he traveled constantly and bragged about never getting vaccinated or taking any health precautions. He thought it made him seem tough. There were rumors he'd infected people with things and simply vanished. Why didn't you tell me you knew him? I didn't connect it until Mom mentioned Diana went to Peru with someone from work named Nathan. Then I looked him up on LinkedIn and recognized the face. Uncle Marcus, I'm mi pareja, sorry. If I'd known sooner, this isn't your fault, I said. But I need you to do something for me. Write down everything you remember about him. Names of women he targeted, schools, employers, travel destinations, anything at all. You're building a case against him. I'm building a profile. Diana isn't the only one he did this to. There may be others who don't even know they were exposed. Sophie promised to send me a comprehensive summary by the following day. After we hung up, I sat in the car for a long moment, processing. Nathan Forsyth wasn't merely careless. He was calculated, predatory. And Diana had walked directly into his trap. Inside the restaurant, my attorney was already waiting. I slid into the booth and ordered a drink I genuinely needed. We have a complication, I said. Diana may not just be a victim of her own poor choices. She appears to have been specifically targeted by someone with a documented pattern of this exact behavior. He raised an eyebrow. That actually strengthens your case. If she was manipulated by a known predator, it explains the rapid escalation, but it doesn't dissolve her agency. She still chose to go. It also means I need to report this to the CDC, I said. If Forsyth has been traveling internationally while knowingly infected or at risk, he's an active public health threat. You're required to report? Ethically, yes. Legally, it's complicated. But if other women are at risk, I'm not staying quiet. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number, a single text message. You're looking for Nathan. Stop, he's already dead. I showed my attorney. His face shifted immediately. Forward that to me and don't respond. Who sends a message like that? Someone who doesn't want me digging, I said. Which means I'm getting close to something they need to stay buried. I forwarded the message and pulled up my CDC contacts number. Time to make this official. Because if Nathan Forsyth was actually dead, someone needed to trace everyone he'd exposed before this got any larger. And if he wasn't dead, then someone was actively protecting him. Either way, Diana's affair had just become a federal matter. Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you'll find all our supplements, from fitness to overall health and wellness, covering every aspect of taking care of yourself. 3 days after Diana moved into the guest suite, Sophie sent me a document that reframed everything I thought I understood. 29 pages, names, dates, incidents spanning Nathan Forsyth's entire adult life. 7 women before Diana, all fitting the same profile almost exactly. Married, professional, financially secure, over 35. Each relationship following the same choreographed sequence. Nathan would target a woman in a position of mild authority over him, perform the role of devoted mentee, escalate to an affair, then vanish suddenly, leaving a trail of damaged careers, collapsed marriages, and in at least 2 cases, serious medical complications. One of the women had lost her job over the fallout. Another had attempted suicide. Sophie had found an anonymous blog post that woman had written years later, precise enough in its details to verify, devastating in what it described: the isolation, the shame, the health complications she'd developed after spending time with Nathan in Costa Rica. I forwarded everything to my CDC contact with a single subject line: potential public health investigation required. She called within an hour. Marcus, this is larger than I realized. If this pattern holds across all these incidents, we're looking at multiple international exposure events. I need to bring this to my director. Do it, I said, but keep Diana's name out of the official documentation as long as you can. She's already lost everything. I don't need her publicly humiliated on top of it. That's generous given what she did to you. It's strategic, I said. If this turns into a media event, my divorce proceedings get complicated. I want this clean. That evening, Diana knocked on the door of the main house. She'd lost weight in just 3 days, her clothes hanging differently, her face drawn. The medication was clearly hitting her hard. Can we talk? She asked. I let her in but didn't offer her a seat. She stood in the foyer like a guest who wasn't sure of her welcome. My lawyer says I'm going to lose everything, she said. The house, the retirement accounts, even my health insurance once the divorce finalizes. I can't afford the medication costs on my own. It's over $2,000 a month. My company fired me yesterday. I'd known the termination was coming. Hearing it confirmed still gave me a strange, quiet satisfaction. You should have thought about that before Peru. Mi pareja, you're just going to let me suffer? I'm going to let you experience the natural outcome of your own decisions. You're a grown adult, Diana. You made choices. Now you handle what those choices produced. I made one mistake, she said, her voice climbing. One terrible mistake, and you're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal. You committed fraud against your employer. You exposed yourself to a documented health risk you had no business dismissing. You deceived me for weeks with an elaborate cover story. That's not one mistake. That's a sustained pattern of deliberate deception. She wiped her eyes. What about Nathan? He targeted me. He manipulated me. Doesn't that matter? It changes nothing, I said, because you're an adult with full agency who chose to board a plane, share a hotel room, and ignore every instinct that should have told you something was wrong, because it felt good. Nathan being predatory doesn't erase your responsibility. My lawyer mentioned you're building a CDC case against him. You will be called as a witness, I said, along with the other 7 women he did this to. Diana's face went pale. 7? I pulled out my phone and showed her Sophie's document. 7 that we've confirmed my pareja far. You're not a unique story, Diana. You're the most recent chapter. She read in silence for a moment, then lowered the phone slowly. He'd done this before. Multiple times. Yes, and you knew when? I confirmed it 3 days ago. It doesn't change our situation. It changes everything. If he specifically targeted me, if this was planned, then you fell for it, I said. Which proves that you were willing to betray our marriage when the right circumstances presented themselves. The manipulation doesn't absolve you. It just explains why you were an easy target. She flinched like I'd touched something raw. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. You've been confusing the two for years. She left without another word. I watched her walk back across the yard to the guest suite, shoulders curved against the evening air. Some small part of me registered something like pity, but pity doesn't reverse betrayal, and I'd already learned that lesson the expensive way. My phone rang before I could even close the door. My attorney, the CDC, opened a formal investigation into Forsyth, he said. They found him. He's not dead. He's in Mexico, operating under a different name. Extradition proceedings are underway. This is going to get significant, Marcus. Federal investigation, international scope, multiple victims. Your divorce is going to look like a footnote. Good, I said. That's exactly where I want it. The CDC press conference happened on a Friday morning. I watched it from my office in Washington. Colleagues moving around me as news alerts lit up every screen in the building. Federal health officials seeking information about a man wanted in connection with multiple international exposure incidents. Nathan Forsyth's corporate LinkedIn photo staring out from every major news outlet. That familiar, easy smile, completely unaware that its owner was about to become the face of a federal investigation. My phone started flooding with messages. Colleagues, former classmates, my sister calling twice. I ignored most of them and kept working, maintaining a neutral expression even as Diana's name began appearing in connection with the case. Someone had leaked it. Inevitable with this many parties involved. By noon, Virginia local news had it. DC policy advisor's wife among victims of international health scandal. I went to lunch alone, bought a sandwich I didn't eat, walked along the mall trying to process what came next. My career was solid enough to survive this. My reputation would take a minor hit. Nothing permanent. I'd positioned myself correctly from the beginning. The diligent spouse who'd identified the public health risk and reported it through proper channels. Diana had no such positioning. When I got home that evening, 2 news vans were parked on our street. Cameras pointed at the front door. I drove past and parked at a neighbor's house, cut through their backyard and entered my own property through the side gate. Inside the guest suite, I found Diana sitting in the dark with the curtains drawn, phone switched off. They've been calling all day, she said when I knocked and stepped inside. Someone gave them my number. Don't speak to anyone without a lawyer present, I said. Everyone knows now. My old colleagues, my friends, my mother called me crying. She said I've humiliated the entire family. She looked at me in the dim light. Do you have any mercy left at all? I have honesty, I said. That's worth more than mercy. Mercy implies you deserve protection from consequences. You don't. The CDC wants me to come in for an interview. They said it's voluntary, but my lawyer thinks I should cooperate. Full cooperation. Give them everything. The timeline, the trip, everything you know about Nathan. It's your only viable move now. And then what? After I testify and this is all over, what happens to me? I leaned against the doorframe. You start over, new city probably, new career path. Rebuild your reputation somewhere no one knows the story. Get your health sorted out. Move forward, without you, without me, I confirmed. That part was decided some time ago. She nodded slowly. Accepting it, finally. I keep thinking about what you said about being an easy target, she said quietly. You were right. I wanted to feel significant again. Nathan made me feel seen when I'd stopped feeling that way. I saw you, I said. I just didn't perform it the way you wanted. I thought showing up, building a stable life, handling everything that needed handling, I thought that was enough. It should have been, she said. I know that now. But knowing it now doesn't change anything. No, I agreed. It doesn't. I went back to the main house and stood at the front window watching the news vans finally pull away as it got dark. Tomorrow I'd release a brief statement through my attorney, professional, measured, sympathetic toward the investigation, firm about my own position. Then I'd move forward with my life, exactly as I'd been planning since the moment I first opened those credit card statements. Diana would either rebuild or she would collapse. Either way, it was no longer something I could carry for her. I'd done what needed doing, flagged the threat, protected public health, maintained my integrity throughout. The rest was just paperwork. 4 months after Diana moved out permanently, I attended a public health policy conference in Atlanta. The keynote addressed international disease surveillance and the critical importance of early intervention frameworks. My name appeared in the conference program as a contributor to a case study on identifying exposure chains before they escalate into full outbreaks. Nathan Forsyth wasn't named directly. Everyone in the room knew exactly who the case was about. I sat through the presentation feeling something I could only call vindication. Reporting Forsyth hadn't just protected Diana and the other women. It had shut down a predator who'd been operating internationally for years with complete impunity. That mattered. That was worth something beyond my own situation. After the session, a woman approached me near the exit. Late 40s, professional, carrying herself with the careful dignity of someone who'd survived something that tried to break them. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "I'm Claire Hartley. I was one of Nathan's victims, Costa Rica, 5 years ago." I shook her hand. "Sophie mentioned you in her research. I'm sorry for what you went through." "Don't be sorry. Be proud. You stopped him. You did what none of us could do because we were all too ashamed to go on record." She paused. "How is your wife?" "Ex-wife. The divorce finalized last month. She's in Arizona now, working for a non-profit. She completed the medical treatment successfully. Last I heard, she's in remission." "That's good. I don't wish her harm. I just wish she'd been smarter." "We all do," I said. Claire handed me a card. "There's a support group for women who were targeted by Nathan. We meet monthly online. If your ex-wife ever wants to reach out, she's welcome. No judgment, just people who understand." I took it. "I'll pass that along." She held my gaze for a moment. "And Mr. Ellison, thank you for not protecting him, for choosing to expose the truth even when it would have been easier to just handle your divorce quietly and move on. That took real courage." After she left, I stood in the conference hallway for a long moment. 7 women, maybe more that we hadn't found yet. All of them preyed upon and abandoned and left to manage the fallout alone. I'd done the right thing, not just for my own situation, but for all of them. That evening, I called Diana. We hadn't spoken in 2 months, not since the divorce papers were signed. She answered on the 3rd ring, cautious. "Marcus, I met someone today who wanted me to give you something," I said. I explained about Claire and the support group, gave her the contact information. Silence on the line. Then, quietly, "Thank you. How are you doing?" I asked, surprising myself a little with the question. "Better. The treatment worked. I'm clear. No more symptoms. The job is decent. Phoenix is hot but manageable. I'm rebuilding. Good. I saw the conference program online. They mentioned your contribution to the Forsyth case. You were right about everything, from the beginning." "Yes," I said simply. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know I'm genuinely sorry for all of it. I know you are, and I accept the apology, but we're still not getting back together." She made a sound that was half laugh, half something else. "I wasn't asking. I just needed you to know. Now I know." We hung up shortly after. I felt something ease in my chest, a tension I hadn't been consciously aware I was still carrying. Diana was going to be okay. She'd survive this, maybe even grow from it. But she'd do all of that without me, and I was genuinely at peace with that. The following week, I met with my attorney to discuss establishing a small anonymous fund, not for Diana, for the other women Sophie had documented. Women still managing medical costs and therapy bills and career damage from Nathan's trail of destruction. "You're setting up a fund for them?" my attorney asked. "Anonymous, modest amount, nothing that affects me significantly, but enough to help cover medication costs or counseling." "They deserve something. That's generous. It's the right thing," I said. "And those women helped build the case that put Nathan away. This is just acknowledgement, but honestly, it was more than that. Not everyone had what I had. Not everyone could weather a crisis with a career intact, assets protected, and a professional network that came through when it counted. Some people needed someone in their corner. I was in a position to do that for a few of them. That felt like justice in a way that the divorce settlement never quite did. Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you'll find all our supplements, from fitness to overall health and wellness, covering every aspect of taking care of yourself. 8 months after Diana left, I attended a private CDC briefing I hadn't expected to be called to. Nathan Forsyth had been found dead in a Mexican hospital. Complications from the same parasitic infections he'd been spreading to others for years. "Poetic," some of my colleagues said quietly in the hallway afterward. I didn't argue the point. The briefing room was small and contained only the people who'd been directly involved in the investigation. They walked us through the full picture. Forsyth's movements tracked across 3 continents, 17 separate exposure incidents documented, 12 confirmed victims including Diana. The case was now officially closed. The threat was gone. I sat in that room feeling nothing but professional satisfaction. Nathan Forsyth had built his life on calculated recklessness, treating other people as props in a game that only he was playing. Now the game was over. Afterward, I drove to Diana's parents' house. They'd reached out through her attorney asking to meet. Her mother answered the door looking older and quieter than I remembered. Her father stood when I entered the living room and shook my hand with the grip of a man who understood what it meant to have failed at something. "We wanted to apologize," he said, "for the position our daughter put you in." "That's not necessary," I said. "It is," Diana's mother insisted. "We raised her with better values than what she demonstrated. We taught her that integrity matters. What she did was inexcusable." "She's rebuilding her life," I said. "That's what matters now. We know. She calls us. She's in therapy. She's working through it. We're proud of how she's handling the aftermath, even if we're ashamed of the choices that created it." "She learned a hard lesson," I said, "but she did learn it." Diana's mother poured coffee. None of us touched it. They sat with the particular resignation of parents who love a child while being unable to defend what that child did. "Will you ever forgive her?" her father asked finally. I thought about it honestly before answering. "I don't think in terms of forgiveness anymore," I said. "I think about consequences and choices and what you build after the wreckage clears. Diana made decisions that ended our marriage. I made decisions that protected my future. We're both living with those outcomes now. That's as close to resolution as either of us is going to get." They accepted this without argument. I left their house and drove home through countryside that was turning gold with autumn. Stopped at a farm stand on the side of the road and bought a jug of fresh apple cider, something Diana and I had done together every October for almost 2 decades. Stood in the parking lot for a moment holding it, feeling the weight of that old routine, knowing it was ending permanently. But it didn't hurt the way I would have expected. It was just finished. That was different from hurt. At home, a letter was waiting in my mailbox. Diana's handwriting on the envelope. Phoenix postmark. I almost threw it away without opening it. Then I didn't. A single page inside. "Marcus, I heard about Nathan. Part of me feels relief that he can't hurt anyone else. Part of me feels guilty for that relief. But mostly what I feel is grateful. Grateful that you were strong enough to stop him when I wasn't capable of stopping anything. Grateful that you protected other women even after everything I put you through. grateful that you showed me what real integrity looks like from the inside, even though I only understood it clearly after I'd already lost you. I'm doing better. The infection is gone. My therapist says I'm making real progress. I joined Claire's support group. We help each other. I wanted you to know that I'm using this experience to become better rather than bitter. I won't contact you again. You deserve peace and privacy, and I want to give you that. But I needed you to know that your refusal to enable my self-destruction may have saved my life. Thank you for loving me enough to let me face what I'd done. And thank you for being the kind of person who reports threats even when looking the other way would have been significantly easier. You were always the better person in this. I just couldn't see it until it was too late. I read it twice, then I filed it in a drawer, not as a keepsake but as documentation. Evidence that people can learn, can change, can grow from the wreckage of their worst choices. Diana would be fine. She'd rebuild. Find her footing in a life that looked different from the one we'd designed together. And I'd be fine too. Already was, honestly. My career had strengthened through the Forsyth case. I'd been promoted to senior advisor and was now leading a new initiative on international health security frameworks. Sophie had been hired into my department, sharp and committed and untouched by the institutional cynicism that settles in after too many years in government. I had good work, people I respected, and the steady satisfaction of knowing I'd acted with integrity when the moment actually demanded it. Some nights I thought about Diana, wondered whether things might have gone differently if I'd been more attentive, more present, more whatever she'd needed. But those thoughts stayed academic. Curiosity without grief attached. Because here's what all of this taught me. Slowly and then all at once. You cannot save people from themselves. You can only protect yourself from the consequences of their choices and hope, quietly, that they eventually learn something from the damage they left behind. Diana learned. Nathan didn't. And I moved forward. That was more than enough.